really matters? That might be the most important question you can ask. So let's talk about it. Welcome to What Really Matters podcast, Everyday Spirituality with Karen Wyatt. Thank you for joining me here today for another episode. Today I'm going to talk about what to do with a broken heart. And I think the reason for this topic coming up right now is obvious to all of us who are listening in the moment as soon as this episode airs, but some of you might be listening in the future, might be wondering, gosh, what was happening back then in early June, late May of 2022? And I begin with a story from Uvalde, Texas, where, for one thing, we've just recently had a horrific mass shooting in an elementary school. And the story was published that the husband of the teacher, Irma Garcia, who died, was shot in this attack on her classroom. Her husband, Joe, who had been married to her for 24 years, died suddenly of a heart attack after visiting the memorial for the victims of that mass shooting. He died from what is known as Takasubo Syndrome, which is literally a broken heart from grief or trauma, when the heart just suddenly seizes. And sometimes people die. Not everyone dies, but he died. He had a massive heart attack and died in that moment. He literally died from a broken heart over grief from his wife's death. And right now, I think all of us in this moment, as I'm recording this, are dealing with some degree or another of heartbreaking grief. Grief that's been cumulative for the last 2.5 years, but grief that is being piled upon layer after layer after layer with no opportunity to do any healing before another new traumatic event occurs. So we've been dealing with this COVID pandemic for 2.5 years, and in the month of May 2022, here in the US, we just crossed the milestone of 1 million lives lost. We know there have been more lives than that, attributable perhaps to the pandemic, maybe not directly from COVID, but people who may have died because they couldn't get other care that they needed during that time. But this number, 1 million lives lost, that stands out in our minds. That is a huge number. It's actually unfathomable. I'm sure most of us have never really thought about what 1 million people might look like. Just how large a group of people that is, just how many souls have departed this planet because of the pandemic. It's almost such a huge number that it's hard for us to grieve if we haven't personally lost someone during this time and during this process. It may be hard for us to really fathom the pain of it, of that many people dying from this disease. But in addition to that, on top of all of that, we've experienced a war in Ukraine that's been going on since March. We've been hearing stories every day of innocent lives lost, of horrific destruction, pain, suffering, loss, trauma. We're beholding this happening before our very eyes and dealing with a total feeling of helplessness, utter helplessness. We cannot fix this. We are not able to make this better. We're simply sitting here having to watch it happen on our planet before our eyes. And speaking of our planet, we're watching global climate change worsen before our eyes as well. We're watching the loss of species, of habitat on our planet. We're watching these changes happen before our eyes, and no matter how much each one of us tries to do, again, we feel helpless. There's so little that we can do to make an impact on the large scale that is needed. At least that's how it feels. We simply feel powerless. We feel so tiny and so small in the face of these massive catastrophes. And then here in the US, we have had mass shootings. Again, horrific, senseless, crushing, devastating, shattering to see innocent lives lost of people who were shopping in a grocery store, people who were worshiping at their church, little children who were in their school classroom, and teachers who were trying to keep those children safe. We've seen those lives be taken from us in an instant. And once again, we are simply shattered by all of this loss and pain. It's overwhelming. It's incredible to even try to fathom all of it when we put all of this together at the same time. We've been shattered over and over again so many times. Our hearts are in millions upon millions of little pieces. These pieces, they're shards of our hearts that are so sharp that we bleed just to touch them, to try to piece our hearts together again. They are fragments so fragile that they splinter into even more and more tiny pieces when we try to put everything back together again. What can we do with these broken hearts of ours? How are we ever going to be able to heal? How are we going to be able to return to life again? How can we unburden ourselves from this pain that we are all carrying collectively? Some of us may be asleep to it. We know people in our circles who may not be feeling it, who may be shutting it out and blocking it out. But there are many of us who cannot help but feel the pain, who cannot help but carry it on our shoulders within our own shattered hearts. So I've been thinking about and looking at what can we do at this moment when our hearts are broken. We are not likely to die of Takasubo Syndrome ourselves. We are being asked to be witnesses of all of this pain and to help hold it, to help for all of life on this planet, to help hold and carry the pain that is here. And we have to figure out how we're going to do that. The first thing that I've learned is that we have to sit with the pain. We can't try to erase it. We can't even try to bandage it for now. We can't try to pick up all the pieces and somehow glue them back together again. We simply have to sit in the middle of these broken hearts of ours and just be here, be present, and be a witness to the pain. I've learned that broken hearts have their own time frame for healing. And as much as we might wish we could speed it up and get through this process more quickly, we can't do that. We have to allow this time frame to play out on its own, whatever it might be. We can't run away. We can't resist it. We can't rush it. We just have to sit in the middle of the pain. And so as we are sitting here, as we are witnessing the pain that is coursing through us, our own pain, but we're also connecting with the collective pain of everyone else around us, what can we do? And I have a few thoughts. First of all, verbalize the pain. And And what I mean, the usage of verbalize here is put it into words. So to begin with, write. Pick up a pencil and a piece of paper and start writing. Maybe poetry will come out. And I'm not talking about beautiful, lovely words. I'm talking ugly poetry, ugly, shouting, angry words, which may need to come out. Lamenting, sorrowful, weeping words may come out. You might write stories. You might write just free form, whatever comes to your mind, anything. It might be gibberish. It might make no sense whatsoever. But it's helpful to put a pen or a pencil to paper and just write and write and write. Write out your grief. Let it flow through you and out your hands onto the paper. And again, not to be beautiful, not to be judged by anyone else or even read by anyone else. Maybe you won't even read it again, simply to have a place to express what is happening within you through the power of words, and raw words, real words, not words that are inspirational or transformational necessarily, words that express the pain in the best way possible. And then not just verbalize on paper, but vocalize the pain. A few weeks ago, I did an interview with Mary McLaughlin from Ireland, who studies Irish wakes and Irish keening, this morning ritual of chanting, almost wailing and singing during a funeral for the purpose of expressing grief. And she's been studying it. It's an extremely old practice. And I remembered that several years ago, I was traveling in Italy and I visited Paestum, which is a site of Greek ruins. And there happened to be an exhibit in the museum there on mourning in very early cultures in that area of the country. And they had found a number of grave sites with tombs and also burial containers that had carvings in them that showed women walking in a funeral processional, pulling at their hair, beating their chests, and raising their eyes to heaven with their mouths open. And you could see in these carvings, the women were screaming, wailing, crying, weeping, shouting out the pain. And what I learned from the video I watched there is that there were often in the community professional paid mourners who came to funerals to help other people grieve. They vocalized the pain and the grief, which allowed other people to feel it and to bring it to the surface. And I realized that is what we need to do. We need to bring this pain to the surface, and we need to vocalize it in any way we can. Maybe, we don't know, we haven't learned how to actually keen, but maybe we ourselves can find a way to chant or sing or wail or cry out loud so that we give voice to the pain that is within us. Maybe we can shout into a pillow. Maybe we can go in the woods and shout. Next to a waterfall can be a good place to shout, where there's so much ambient noise that our voices will hardly be heard by anyone else or disturbed by anyone else. But I think it's important that we allow the energy and the pain of the grief to surface and to be released into the air. I think that can help us to move through our grief, to get it moving inside of us, but also help others who may connect with that energy that we're expressing from our grief. So we have to get over some of our shyness and our inhibition about vocalizing when we're grieving. I don't hear that happen very often. Even all the funerals I've attended, sometimes you barely hear people crying. You hear people stifling their cry, covering their mouths with Kleenex, trying not to make a sound so that no one will hear their sorrow, so that no one else will have to be disturbed by the pain that they're in. And we really need help. We need help being able to vocalize this pain. And maybe it's a group singing a powerful song together, clapping hands, stomping feet, somehow something that helps us move this pain through us. I remember back when I was 16, one of my classmates died in a hiking accident. She fell off a ledge and died of her injuries. And at her funeral, which was in the Catholic church in our town, at the very end of the ceremony, we sang the song. I don't know the actual name of it, but the song that has the chorus, "All we are saying is give peace a chance." And this was, of course, back in the 70s, so it was a common song for people to sing back then. But as a congregation, we sang that song to the top of our voices as loud as we could. We clapped our hands, we stomped our feet, we pounded on the wooden pews with our fists, and we sang that chorus over and over and over again. And it was the most amazing experience. We cried, we wept through that song, but there was so much energy in the room and so much power that came from it. And we need to do this. We need to have funeral rituals that allow us as a group to come together and express this pain. Sing it, say it, shout it, weep it, wail it together. Pound it out with our fists, with the palms of our hands, with our feet, to get it out of us and out into the atmosphere where there is a possibility of healing taking place. When this energy can move, it can bring creativity and healing for us. The third thing that I thought of, and again, this comes from interviews I've done, things I've read from my own experience with grief, is to move with grief. Use our physical bodies and feel the grief in the body and allow it to move through us and help it to move through us. Go for a walk or a hike. Go for a run. Dance. Put on music and do an incredible free-form creative dance that just expresses everything that you need to release within you. And there's also grief yoga, which can be a way of expressing grief and moving it through your body. And I did an interview in the past with Paul Denniston, who teaches grief yoga. And a couple of the movements that I learned from reading about grief yoga that you can do, which these help you move grief through your body, but also to vocalize it. One practice I'll describe for you is called breaking the chains. And so while you're standing, you put your forearms in front of your chest, one on top of the other, resting on top of the other. Then you push both of your elbows back toward your sides, opening up your arms and pushing your chest forward. And make that a sudden, abrupt movement, pushing your elbows back. And as they go back and your chest expands, let out a firm ha. Shout that out, ha, so that you can release that energy that's been stored around your heart and in your chest through the word ha and with your air as you exhale, saying that. So you can do that break the chains movement several times. Arms in front of your chest, then push your elbows back hard. Open your chest, shout ha as you do that movement. And the second option is called wood chopper, Where you stand, again, keep your feet about hip width apart and your knees bent just slightly. Then interlace your fingers together, bring them overhead, up above your head, so your arms are fairly straight above your head. And then you bring down your fists, your interlaced fingers that are kind of in a fist together, bring them down in front of you in a chopping motion, keeping your elbows fairly straight. Just bring them down as if you're chopping something, a piece of wood with your hands. Chop sharply, hard, and again shout ha as you chop with your hands. So another motion that you can do over and over again to help you release this energy that's been stored inside of you and sometimes gets stuck. When we feel so broken and so shattered, the energy itself is sometimes in pieces throughout our system. We need a way to consolidate that energy and then release it. So the wood chopper, think of that again, using your fist and bringing it down as if you were going to chop and break a piece of lumber, and shout out ha as you do that. So a way to move through your body and vocalize at the same time. Another really beautiful practice. Other things that you can do is use this energy that's within you to create something. Maybe create a piece of art. Maybe you draw or paint something, or just splash color onto a canvas or a piece of paper. Maybe you use photography. I met a young woman who, after her fiance died, took a self photo every day for a year. She took pictures of herself in different settings, but photographed what her face looked like as she was grieving, and then she published these amazing photographs that she took. Maybe writing is your thing and you write in your journal, and maybe, as we mentioned before, as part of verbalizing, you create written pieces that express what you need to say. But use your creativity to find ways to release this energy of grief into the world. You can also give, be generous, maybe donate money or your time to causes that make sense to you, that help with the suffering of other people. Any cause that you feel might help make some sort of difference in the world, because that gets you out of feeling so helpless and so powerless. When you feel there's something that you can give to, that you can see a small difference being made right before your eyes. And then ultimately, if and when you have time, I'm also a big advocate for grief travel, which I've written and talked about in the past, for planning travel to a place or a location that has some sort of meaning for you or meaning for lots of other people. Maybe you travel to a memorial site. Maybe you go to an ancestral location that's near you, a place that has meaning for big groups of people. Maybe you go to a museum, like a Holocaust museum, but you plan specifically to travel to a place where you can experience and express your grief through your presence in that physical space. And it's important that this kind of grief travel be intentional and be planned, so you know where you're going and why you're going there, and you can bring with you special items to help you. Maybe you bring, a battery operated candle and a journal and a special shawl or other items that have significance for you. You make sure you have some ritual items so that in the moment when you're in that space, you can create something, a little ritual of meaning for yourself. Now, I advocate planning, but also being spontaneous, because sometimes things happen on these grief pilgrimages that you couldn't plan for. you'll meet someone along the way. You'll find something. You'll see a flower. It might rain on you. Something may happen that you weren't expecting or prepared for, but it's in those surprises and those synchronicities that arise in the moment while you're traveling that can help you the most as you're working toward processing and moving the grief. So I recommend that you think about what might help you, what fits you, what do you resonate with of the ideas that I've talked about today, because I think it's really crucial that we work on this intention of slowly, gradually acknowledging our grief, making a space for it in our lives, figuring out how we're going to live with it, but also express it. How are we going to make it real in the world that we are carrying pain right now? What are we going to do with this grief? What can we create? What can we shout and share that will help us in this process and on our journey and may help other people at the same time? I hope some of these ideas resonate with you. I imagine if you're listening to this, you may be feeling pain as I am right now. And so we are sharing together in this moment. As you are listening, you're sharing in this feeling and energy and pain that I am expressing in this moment, even if we're sharing it across space and across time. We're connecting right now. And so that's the final message, is to remember that none of us is experiencing this alone. In fact, all of this pain is communal pain. It's just that much of the time we don't recognize that. We don't recognize that we are all part of this pain of grief. It's part of our human experience. So we're all connected more than we ever know. And let's begin there. Let's begin by recognizing this is what binds us together and connects us as humans. This pain and this grief and this love, which is the ultimate source of our pain, is the fact that we love. And let's continue to love. As I say, every week we're here for love. That's the thing that matters more than anything else. So let's honor the love and the grief that springs from our love and face our fear together, knowing that we're not alone, preparing ourselves for whatever else may happen next, since there's always something. And please, may we just love each and every moment of this fleeting life while we have it right here, right now, in this moment. Bye-bye.